I mostly just read Zootopia porn, so...
Alright, here we go. Resident Evil is a series that I find most interesting. It's the series I consider to be the pioneer of the PlayStation 2 horror genre, and throughout its lifetime as a series, it's caused a ripple effect far beyond the horror genre itself. Did you know that we wouldn't have Devil May Cry or the Bayonetta series if it wasn't for Resident Evil? It blows my mind, honestly. Like, without Resident Evil 4's demos and, like, the ideas that they were throwing around, Devil May Cry and Bayonetta never would have existed. Unfortunately, a series as old and as expansive as the Resident Evil series is bound to have a few blunders on its record. The Paul W.S. Anderson movies are a mixed bag, though personally I really enjoy those movies, especially if you're drinking with friends. Great time. Resident Evil 6 is a game that most people in the fandom don't really acknowledge, and for good reason, mind you. Resident Evil 8 was mid, fight me on that, mid at best. And the most recent attempts to make Resident Evil more cinematic in terms of shows and films have been bad. Very bad. Sometimes painfully bad. And that brings us to what I want to talk about today.
Howdy heck and hey my dudes. Now, real quick before we start, this video is sponsored by me and my graphic novel, Forget Me Not Aconite. Paperbacks, hardcovers, and ebooks are now available worldwide. Simply click the link in the description below to start your purchase. If you like zombies, drama, and character-driven narratives a la The Walking Dead, then there's definitely something here for you. So, I mean, you know, there's no harm in giving it a quick look, am I right? There's also a Patreon where you can support the graphic novel's continuation, or if you want something a little less renewable, you can buy me a coffee. Any bit of support to keep the series going is greatly appreciated. Alright, now back to the video.
Netflix's 2022 Resident Evil drama series is not Resident Evil. It's Resident Evil in name and in no other way. Now, I would like to point out that this is the opinion of someone who's only watched the first episode of the Resident Evil series thus far. I do plan on watching the whole series, as painful as that may be, and as much as I would rather gouge my eyes out, but this is so far just a first impression kind of thing after watching the first episode. And when I tell you that the first episode was bad, I was in physical pain. I was cringing so hard that my face hurt. I was laughing so much because if I didn't, I was going to start crying. And I wish I was exaggerating. This is absolutely atrocious. There has never been a show or film out there that has made me physically sick before. First things first, and this is something that I didn't actually notice when I was watching it the first time with my friend. This is something that I realized when I was coming back to write down my thoughts and opinions. But they got the entire setting of the Resident Evil world wrong. The world within 2022's Netflix series is post-apocalyptic. They say that the world ended in 2022 when, I'm assuming, the T-virus kind of just sprung out of control and caused this whole post-apocalyptic setting. But if you've ever taken like 5 minutes to sit down and play a Resident Evil game or watch a cutscene or hell even watch the animated films, you would know that that's not the case. There have been outbreaks and places have been run down and infested with the zombies, but there's never been like a full-blown worldwide apocalypse. It's all been very, very contained, and you can see that, once again, within the films and within the games. I don't understand why this crucial detail that sets the Resident Evil world apart from literally every other zombie horror series was left out. It feels generic, it feels more like The Walking Dead, to be honest, and the way that they display this in the opening cutscene with the CGI is the absolute fucking worst. I'm trying very hard not to get heated in this, but like, oh my god, it's so... Just look at it. Just look, this is disgusting. Who let this slide? Unfortunately, this god-awful CGI that makes me want to gouge my eyes out with a rusty spoon seems to be a common thread within this episode, and I swear to god, if it continues within the series, I might actually just gouge out my eyes with the rusty spoon. But aside from all the ways I could torture myself that would be fundamentally more interesting than this film, this is Jade. No, I'm not going to be referring to her with her last name because fuck you. Now this is a really interesting concept. We learn that even though it's been 14 years since the world allegedly ended, Jade has a husband and a daughter in some undisclosed location. And looking at the background in the videos, it actually looks like they're set up pretty well, which has me very confused. Like, did the world actually end in 2022, and are we actually in this post-apocalyptic world 14 years into the future? Or are they actually pulling a Resident Evil and saying that only this section of the world is post-apocalyptic and it's an isolated incident? And if it is an isolated incident, why wouldn't you say that? Why would you say that the entire world has ended if the entire world hasn't ended? Also, where are your husband and child? Where are they? We learn that Jade's been separated from her family for about 6 months, studying the zombies. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll get to what they're called in a minute. But studying the zombies to see if they develop any kind of intelligent life or to analyze how they adapt and stuff. And she does this by injecting a rabbit with some kind of serum. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but this is heavily contradictory to something we see later on in the episode where her and her sister go to save a bunch of rabbits because they're so against animal testing, but that's neither here nor there. She comments that the zombies haven't seemed to evolve in any significant way, and then, like the fucking dumbass she is, accidentally scratches herself and bleeds and gets the attraction of every single zombie in the area. Which, I'm sorry, if you've been studying them and analyzing their patterns for about 6 months, you would think that you would have some kind of more protective gear, or you would be that little bit extra careful. You can't just, whoopsie doopsie, I cut myself, now we have an epic chase scene. And I put epic in very heavy quotations. Moving on. So anyway, yeah, she's like chased by the zombies or whatever. They set off like a fire trap. There's some kind of gas or like powder or something that gets like all over the zombies. I don't know what's happening anymore. But then my favorite part of the episode, we get this giant caterpillar kind of creature that's like crawling after her. And not gonna lie, I actually really like this caterpillar. Like, sure, it may not be the best in terms of implementing CG into a live action scene, but it looks cool, it's fun, and I really like when Resident Evil does bug horror. I gotta give this show credit where I can, guys, be kind to me. We then get thrown back into the year of 2022, where we meet Jade, her sister Billy, who apparently isn't actually her sister, but like whatever, and their father, Albert Wesker. Now, this is just a nitpick on my end, but this is something that I genuinely want to talk about because it did actually bother me while I was watching the series. Just the general vibe and the way that Raccoon City looks. Oh, I'm sorry. New Raccoon City. The fact that it's labeled as New Raccoon City implies that the events within the game that happened in the original Raccoon City occur, but there's literally no other thing to indicate that that's happened aside from the fact that the suburb is called New Raccoon City. And it's not even a city right now. It's a suburb. And like not even a cool or interesting suburb at that. Like everything is plain white. It's like super washed down, super sanitized, kind of like a hospital, which I guess kind of makes sense because Umbrella is a pharmaceutical company. But you'll see it later on when we get to the cafeteria as well, what I mean. This whole set looks like it's a set for a stage play. This doesn't feel like a suburb. This doesn't feel like a high school. This doesn't feel like a home. It's just everything about this is very manufactured in plastic. And maybe that's what they're going for considering this is a suburb created by Umbrella. But this leads to some really, really boring set design. Now, I'm going to throw this out here right now because I do notice a lot of people complaining about this. And I feel like people who complain about this don't actually understand what is wrong with this. Albert Wesker is black. Specifically, he's played by Lance Reddick, who I think does an absolutely phenomenal job. Given how terrible and stale and manufactured the lines that he's given are, he works with them really well, and he's got some really great scenes, which we'll get to in a moment. But the fact that Albert Wesker is a person of color now is not the problem. Wesker could be black, Asian, a woman, non-binary, lesbian, gay, like anything other than a cis white male, and you can still make it work. Under the very specific condition that literally everything else about Wesker's personality stays the same. And this is not our Wesker. Our Wesker is heartless. Our Wesker is relentless. He's flashy. He's a bit of a show-off. He is evil incarnate when it comes to the Resident Evil universe. He doesn't care about anything but himself and gaining power through the virus. The Wesker we get in the Wesker we get in the Netflix 2022 film is a family man. He has 2 daughters who he loves very, very much. And while he is still working for Umbrella and he is one of the top dogs, he seems to be the voice of reason within Umbrella. There's a pill called Joy or whatever, and it's got some kind of pretty severe like side effects in terms of people's mental health and things like that. And he's the one that wants to keep it shelved and continue developing it to minimize those side effects so that people can have a much better experience and like there's a net positive to taking these pills. There's even a scene where he's in a video call with who I'm assuming are 2 executives of Umbrella, and he's trying to say that the symptoms are way too severe and the pill shouldn't be released and it needs more time and this, that, and the other. And it's the executives who are pushing to get this pill out because they want to make the money, they want to see the profits, they want the cha-ching. And it's like, I'm sorry, but in any other Resident Evil content, Wesker would be the one pushing this pill. Hell, he probably wouldn't even be working on the pill, he'd be way too busy trying to figure out how to benefit himself. We do get a hint that these daughters have some kind of utility to Wesker aside from just being his daughters. There's like a scene where they do regular blood tests and stuff, and like it's hinted that there's something to do with their blood that he really, really needs for himself. But that doesn't overshadow the fact that he does genuinely love and care for these girls. And it's just very jarring to see Wesker seen as like a loving, caring father figure type thing. Like, we know that he, technically speaking, does have a son in the Resident Evil games. I'm not too sure. I think it comes up in 6, and we don't talk about 6, as I established earlier. But even then, Wesker was never like a very lovey-dovey, super caring, super protective father figure to this son of his. So, I don't know. This is not Wesker. Let's just leave it at that. This is not Albert Wesker. So anyway, they move into the new house, they get a bit of a look around, we get the famous Zootopia line, and like, honestly, literally any other form of physical torture would be more durable and, dare I say, more entertaining than whatever the fuck this is. This is absolutely pain. And this right here is the moment where we very, very unfortunately find out that our main character, Jade, is quite possibly the most, absolutely insufferable character within this entire series. Honestly, every single time she speaks or even looks at anyone, my blood pressure skyrockets. She is, and I absolutely cannot stress this enough, the biggest fucking bitch that I have ever seen in any kind of media. I literally, the amount of times that I almost looked at my friend and was like, you know what, fuck this, I'm turning it off, is just... She is absolutely insufferable. I cannot believe we have the displeasure of following her throughout this series. She's edgy just for the sake of being edgy. She has that classic, oh, I'm not like other girls, I'm so quirky, with like the Zootopia porn line and stuff like that. She continuously flip-flops between listening to Wesker and like kind of respecting Wesker to just being like, no, fuck you, I hate you, and this, that, and the other. And it's like, dude, I get that you're a teenager and I get that hormones are running, but this is not how a teenager acts. You're not acting like a teenager, you're just acting like a bitch. There's one scene that I feel perfectly highlights this. Jade and Billy start their new school. Billy's trying to be polite, trying to make a friend with someone. This person is an absolute dumpster of a person and just starts absolutely beating the shit out of Billy. And obviously Jade is very upset by this. She reckons Billy should stand up for herself and this, that, and the other. But Billy makes it very clear that she doesn't want to resort to physical violence because of something that happened in her past, which, as far as I know, we will never get to see. So instead of listening to her sister and respecting her sister's wishes, Jade decides to peer pressure Billy into being physically violent with this person, trying to get her to put her in place, show him the bitch and this, that, and the other. She calls her sister boring because she stopped like breaking and entering to rescue animals. It's just absolutely insane. So anyway, they go back to school. Billy chickens out and instead apologizes to the bully, which leads to the bully bullying them even further. And instead of Jade actually doing anything to stand up for her sister, she arguably adds fuel to the fire, just standing there screaming at Billy to do something and to defend herself, and screaming at her, asking where she's going when Billy walks away. Like, if you want so badly for this bully to receive physical punishment and like get beaten down, why don't you do it? Why are you pressuring your sister to do it? You're her sister. It's part of your job to look out for her. And then we get the most absolute backwards logic from Jade. So they have a mascot at the high school, the raccoon, obviously Raccoon City, which isn't a city, but whatever. She gets the raccoon mascot's mask, like headset thing, to disguise her identity, and basically pops off and absolutely beats the shit out of this bully. Like, there's blood everywhere. This bully got beaten hard. But then she does the most absolutely stupid thing and puts the head, like top head of the Raccoon City mascot in her sister's locker. The teachers knew that there was something going on between Billy and this student, like this bully. So when they find out that the bully's been beaten, immediately they go to Billy. They're like, Billy, open your locker, this, that, and the other. Billy opens the locker and the mascot's head is in there, which basically incriminates Billy. If your job was to protect your sister and you wanted to do this to help your sister, then why on earth would you put the raccoon head in her locker? That gets her in so much trouble. Like, why? That's so stupid. Like, are you even trying to protect your sister, or are you trying to get her in even more shit? I'm sorry. I have a sister, so I know how sister relationships work. And this is not a sister relationship, but we'll get to that in a minute. We then have arguably the best scene within the episode, which, to be frank, doesn't actually say much because this entire episode is worse than shit. Genuinely, I would rather sit in front of my cat's litter and smell his shit and have it burning my nose for an hour than watching this episode. But nevertheless, we're now in the principal's office. Albert Wesker is here for his daughter, Billy. And the bully is here with her father. And there's a really interesting power dynamic here because the entire school is funded by Umbrella, just like this entire suburb is run by Umbrella, which means that Albert Wesker most definitely has the upper hand in this situation. And at first, this power play is presented really, really well. The delivery is great, the tone of Lance's voice is fabulous, but then the longer the scene goes on, the more you realize that as terrific as his acting is, and as brilliant as he is as a performer, he cannot save this scene. And this is a scene that really hammered home that there are a lot of parts of this episode, and I'm gonna assume this show as an entirety, that actually have a lot of great potential. And there are some really interesting scenes that they put the characters in, like this power play scene. But the writers just don't seem to understand how people work. Now, these thoughts aren't entirely my own. This is actually something my friend said while we were watching this show that I heavily agree with. So I'm going to recite this. He gave me permission to. Hi, you know who you are. But he essentially said that the worst thing about this show is that the writing is so bad, the dialogue is absolutely terrible, the settings are so boring, that even if you took away the Resident Evil aspect of it and you made it completely original, you like completely eliminated the Weskers, you eliminated Umbrella, you like just changed the names a little bit, this would still be an incredibly terrible show. And I have to agree with him when he says that that's the worst part of this show, because a lot of people are talking about how this isn't Resident Evil, and I myself am a victim of this. I think I said it at least twice, and it's probably the title of this video as well. But the unfortunate truth is that even if it wasn't Resident Evil in name, like, at all, and it was just its own zombie drama thing, the writing is so terrible and the characters are written so poorly and so robotic that it would have flopped regardless. It's not the fact that they don't faithfully adapt Resident Evil that makes it terrible. It's the fundamental writing that makes it terrible. There are so many scenes, particularly between Jade and Billy, where you're supposed to be feeling something. These are supposed to be two sisters confiding in each other. These are supposed to be two forces coming together to do something bigger than themselves. And the dialogue between them feels like it was written by an AI who is trying to emulate what a sister relationship is. It feels very robotic, very stale, incredibly disjointed. And again, as someone who has a sister and knows what a sister relationship is like, this is incredibly disjointing. It takes me out of the story quite a bit because these two just aren't sisters. They're probably not even friends, I would say, with the dialogue that they share. Everything about these two is just incredibly robotic, and it's genuinely sad to see because I love seeing good sister dynamics within media, and unfortunately this just isn't it. But yeah, whatever, plot. So Billy something animal testing with Umbrella. She like gets taken to Umbrella by Albert Wesker, sees a bunch of rabbits and assume that they're doing some kind of animal testing, which she doesn't approve of because Billy is vegan, good for her. But not so good for Albert because she seems to be the kind of vegan that's willing to break and enter into Umbrella, her father's place of work, commit damaged property, and just free all of these rabbits. And it sounds kind of noble on paper, but then you realize she's a 14-year-old. She's breaking into her father's place of work, which is supposed to be heavily secured. We'll get to that in a moment. Just freeing these rabbits. I'm sure that there was a much better way to go about this. But anyway, Jade hears about Billy's plan and tries to emulate what a sister would do, and instead of trying to stop her, decides to go with her. And they're gonna go free the rabbits together. Now, I guess you could call what I'm about to say next a nitpick, but I genuinely don't think it is. I think this is a genuine continuity error with the series. When Billy first comes to Umbrella with Albert Wesker, they make it very clear that on top of having the audio, like vocal recognition to open the doors, there's also a camera that scans for faces. So it's facial recognition and vocal recognition combined to open the door. However, when Billy and Jade return to Umbrella later that night to break in, they only have a recording of Albert Wesker's voice, and that's enough to open the door. Let's ignore the fact that the computer probably would be intelligent enough to determine between an actual voice and a recording, because these two fundamentally sound different, especially because the recording was on a phone and not like a proper mic in a proper sound-closed environment. But on top of that, what happened to the facial recognition part? Like, we know that the cameras are still running because we get a camera shot from the security camera showing the girls opening the door with the facial recognition. And we know that facial recognition is definitely a thing because when Albert Wesker goes up to the door, there's a whole green, like, visual effect over his face, scanning his face. So, did they just get rid of the facial recognition because it wasn't convenient to the plot? Like, whatever. Nevertheless, they get into Umbrella. They do a bit of faffing about, touch a bunch of things that they shouldn't be touching, and this is where we get our first encounter with the zombie dog. And honestly, I don't really have much to say about it. The CG is mid, the design is alright, I guess, but we have this zombie dog now chasing the sisters. They have this really interesting thing that I would consider a stealth mechanic in like a video game, where they activate this like holographic thing that makes a lot of bright noises and is very colorful itself, and they use that to distract the dog while they hide, which I genuinely think is a really smart thing. It's just, once again, the execution in this show was not fantastic. Anyway, blah blah blah, chase scene with the zombie dog. Billy gets bitten, she's like on the floor, there's blood everywhere. Jade is sitting down screaming for help. And another thing about like the security for Umbrella, there is literally nobody here. Not only did they turn off the facial recognition for the cameras, but there's also like no security, no scientists, no like AI generated things, no robots. There is literally no one here. And for a pharmaceutical company as massive as Umbrella, and the place that has so many government secrets as Umbrella, which we know they have, like, there should be more security. Like, why is there nobody here? What happened? Realistically, what would have happened is the vocal recognition at the front door would have realized that it wasn't an actual voice, it was instead a recording, and they would have got shot on the spot because of the security guns. Like, but, you know, whatever, that's just me. So Billy is bit, Jade is on the floor screaming to no one for help because nobody is here, and yeah, that's it. Billy fucking dies. I've been talking about the 2022 timeline of this show quite a bit, so why don't we jump 14 years into the future where I quickly explain my problems with literally every other part of the show. So Jade gets the absolute shit beaten out of her by this giant caterpillar, which for whatever reason decides not to eat her and instead just roar really loudly in her face, before it gets absolutely filled with lead by who I'm assuming is some kind of survivor group. They rescue Jade, bring her back to her stronghold, which for some reason isn't called a stronghold in this series, it's called a freehold, and I don't think the writers of Resident Evil knew what a freehold was. A freehold is essentially when you own property but you don't owe anything for it. Like, you're not paying a mortgage, you're not paying rent or anything, it's just outright your property. That is what a freehold is. But beyond how these writers don't seem to understand human interactions, or the English language for that matter, let's talk about how they don't understand Umbrella. TLDR, Umbrella is looking for survivors, I'm assuming survivors of quote-unquote New Raccoon City, and there's a ransom over Jade's head, and these survivors want to take advantage of that ransom because handing her over will allegedly grant them access to Umbrella secured locations. But then Umbrella shows up with this obese white guy that's trying to pull off an accent but failing somewhat. And instead of Umbrella just taking Jade and then, you know, not doing their part of the deal, not giving these survivors access to Umbrella and just kind of, you know, manipulating them like that, they decide to just outright open fire on these survivors, leaving Jade plenty of time to run away, and also the risk that they would shoot her, which doesn't make any sense. If they want her so badly, then why would they risk this? Why wouldn't they take her on the helicopter and then shoot everyone if they wanted to kill people so badly? So anyway, yeah, Jade is running from Umbrella, Umbrella is chasing her, Jade runs into the obese white guy that's allegedly like some kind of top force within Umbrella, and he tells her to go with him because her sister is waiting. Yeah, within the structure of the original episode, I've split it up a little bit, so we talked about the 2022 timeline, and then we're talking about this timeline, but the way it was structured in this episode was that we were in 2022 with Billy and Jade in Umbrella. They were being chased by the dog. Billy gets bit. She's bleeding out on the floor. They play it out as the death scene. And then we immediately cut to 14 years in the future where Umbrella is after Jade, and then it's revealed that Billy is alive because the guy says that her sister is waiting. There was literally maybe 2 minutes of the entire hour-long film where we thought that Billy was dead. Why would you set up that plotline just to immediately get rid of it? That's not clever. That's really not clever. It's just like, okay, you wasted our time by making this whole scene where we thought she was dead, only to not utilize that and instead just immediately reveal that she was alive. This doesn't make sense. This is bad writing. I don't even want to call this writing. And further on the topic of bad writing, I genuinely didn't know where else in the video to put this, so I'm just gonna smack it onto the end. But the zombies in this universe are called Zeros, which my friend and I went on a massive rant about. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. What is the connection between the word zero and a zombie? I get that every piece of zombie media wants to be different and have a different name for the zombies. I myself have done it, like throughout the first graphic novel that I published, the zombies are literally just called them, which admittedly that wasn't my idea, but I think it's really clever. And there are clever ways you can go about this. In The Walking Dead, they're called walkers because they walk. They're literally dead people who are walking. In The Walking Dead's Telltale Season 3, they're called muertos because muertos is Spanish for dead. I've seen some pieces of media where children refer to zombies as creepy crawlies, which makes perfect sense because creepy crawly is tied to a spider or like any other kind of bug. It's something foreign, creepy, disgusting. It scares them. They call it a creepy crawly. And the way zombies typically walk kind of has that stunted limp, almost crawl kind of effect to it. So that makes sense. That's probably my favorite one. And even the word zombie in and of itself has its own meaning and it's derivative from other words that make sense as to why the zombies are called zombies. Why are Resident Evil zombies called zeros? What is the connection between the number 0 or the word 0 and a zombie? It feels like they literally just used the word 0 instead of zombie because they just wanted to be different. They didn't want to call it a zombie. They wanted to call it something different. They wanted to have their own unique spin on it. And again, it does work, but it only works if you put more than 2 seconds of thought into what you're going to call the zombies. If you want really, really unique zombie names, look no further than Zombieland, and specifically Zombieland 2. They got some really fun and clever ideas. If you're writing a zombie narrative and you want unique names for your zombies, consume other zombie media. I don't think that these writers consumed any other type of zombie media before, and that's probably part of the reason why the story fails so badly. But yeah, that was the first episode of 2022's Resident Evil Netflix series. I glossed over quite a bit of details because quite frankly, the more in-depth I go, the more I want to stab myself by banging my head against my graphics tablet stylus, which isn't even mine. Sorry, Cody, you're gonna have grey matter all over your pen. But if you've listened to anything I've had to say and you've been like, oh, Sylv, it doesn't sound so bad. It sounds like just a stereotypical bad movie. No. I highly, highly advise that you do not watch this under any circumstances. I saw some of the leaked scripts. I saw some of the leaked synopses for the episodes and the dialogue, and I read them way before this show came out, and I was like, okay, this seems pretty bad, but I don't think it'll be that bad. And you actually sit down and watch it, and it is infinitely worse than anything you could ever imagine. So, once again, if you're listening to me and you think, oh, this show doesn't sound too bad, I might give it a go, don't. Like, just straight up, just don't. You could be doing so much more with your life than sitting down and watching the series. But yeah, that's all my thoughts and opinions on this show after watching the first episode. As terrible as it is, and again, as much as I would rather kill myself in 17 different ways, I am going to be finishing this series. Once I finish all 8 episodes, I'll probably come back and do a full synopsis of the series, see if any of my opinions change, see if any of my opinions stay the same, and overall, just, go over the series so that you guys don't have to suffer through any of it. That review honestly won't be coming out until a month or maybe even 2 months from now because I do want to do more content like this, but it takes a lot more work, and considering how busy I am writing my next graphic novel, developing my own YouTube animated series and stuff like that, these videos do take up a lot of time, and so yeah, probably only about once a month. But anyway, thank you everyone for listening to my rambles and opinions on this Resident Evil dumpster fire. Again, don't watch it. Don't watch other people review it. Watch me review it when I come back to do the rest of the series. Don't watch the series. Don't give it any credit. But with that being said, boy howdy, I'm out of here. So stay warm, stay cozy, stay toasty. If you sneeze during the video at all, then bless you. And I will see you when I see ya. Bye bye.